NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, from near collapse to the world's biggest company. Speakers, Guy Raz, host, and Jensen Huang, co-founder and CEO of NVIDIA. Source, How I Built This with Guy Raz, Spotify/Wondery. Date, May 18, 2026. Part 1, Why This Story is Worth Telling. Today, NVIDIA stands as one of the most valuable companies ever built, and in late 2025 it became the first company in history to cross a $5 trillion market value. Its chips quietly power almost everything happening in artificial intelligence right now, from the everyday tools that millions of people tap into, to the systems reshaping science, medicine, industry, and even modern warfare. From the outside, it looks like an overnight triumph. It was anything but. For most of its life, almost nobody believed in NVIDIA. For years, Jensen Huang poured billions of dollars into a technology that had no obvious market, long before artificial intelligence made it pay off, and outsiders openly wondered what he was doing. The story he tells Guy Raz in this conversation is not really the story of a winning company. It's the story of a company that came within weeks of vanishing, more than once, and a founder who kept going largely because turning back never felt like an option. Across 33 years, NVIDIA survived at least 3 separate near-death experiences. This is how it happened. Part 2, From a Reform School to Silicon Valley. Jensen Huang's beginnings were anything but smooth. He was born in Taiwan in 1963, the second son of a chemical engineer and a schoolteacher. When he was around 5, the family moved to Thailand, but with the Vietnam War raging nearby, his parents decided not to settle there permanently. So when Jensen was about 9 years old, they sent him and his older brother across the world to live with relatives in the United States, hoping to give them a better future. Through a mix-up, the 2 boys ended up at a rural boarding school in Kentucky, a place that turned out to be closer to a reform school, full of much older and far tougher kids. Jensen has described mopping floors and learning to fend for himself among troubled teenagers. It was a hard, formative experience, and he credits it with teaching him resilience long before he had any idea what he would do with his life. The family eventually settled in Oregon, where Jensen attended public school. He was a gifted table tennis player as a teenager, even placing 3rd in a national junior tournament and getting a mention in Sports Illustrated. He was clearly bright and driven. He enrolled at Oregon State University young, around the age of 16, to study electrical engineering. It was there, in an engineering lab, that he met his future wife, Lori, who was his lab partner. After graduating, he moved into Silicon Valley's chip industry, first designing microprocessors at a company called AMD, and then moving to LSI Logic, where he rose into a leadership role. Along the way, he earned a master's degree in electrical engineering from Stanford, studying in the evenings and on weekends while he worked. And in one detail that would echo through the rest of his life, one of his early jobs was at a Denny's diner, where he started as a dishwasher and worked his way up to waiter. He says that experience permanently shaped how he handles pressure. To this day, he claims that when the stakes are at their highest, his heart rate actually slows and he performs at his very best. A calm under fire he traces back to surviving the chaos of the diner's busiest hours. Part 3, 3 engineers and a booth at Denny's. That diner would become more than a memory. In 1992, Jensen began meeting 2 fellow engineers he knew through his work, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem, at a Denny's just outside San Jose. Over cheap coffee and plates of diner food, the 3 of them kept returning to the same conviction. Personal computers, they believed, were about to need dedicated hardware to handle 3-dimensional graphics. Games like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D were hinting at what was coming, and the trio became convinced that whoever built that specialized hardware well could own an enormous new market, one they estimated might eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In April of 1993, around the time of Jensen's 30th birthday, they formally launched the company. None of them really knew how to start a business. Jensen has openly admitted that he never even finished writing the business plan, and that he essentially learned how to run a company by reading books and meeting with lawyers. When the lawyer handling their incorporation asked for cash to legally capitalize the company, each founder chipped in $200, and they began with roughly $40,000 to their name. They needed a name, too. They cycled through ideas, even considering Envision, until they discovered a toilet paper company already owned it. They eventually landed on NVIDIA, drawn from the Latin word NVIDIA, meaning envy, because they wanted their rivals to turn green with envy. Even though Jensen was the youngest of the three, his co-founders trusted him to lead from day one. As Curtis Preem later put it, they deferred to Jensen immediately and handed him everything about running the company that the two of them didn't know how to do. Not long after, NVIDIA secured a major early vote of confidence. An investment of around $20 million from top venture firms including Sequoia Capital, a bet placed largely on the founders' reputations and their vision, even though Jensen has admitted his actual pitch was rough. Part 4: The First Chip and the First Catastrophe. NVIDIA's very first product nearly destroyed the company before it could really begin. At the time, the graphics industry was starting to settle on a standard way of building three-dimensional images, out of triangles. NVIDIA, however, made a different bet, designing its first chip, the NV1, around four-sided shapes called quadrilaterals. On paper, it was a defensible technical choice, and it even won the company a large contract with the Japanese gaming giant Sega to power its hardware. Then the ground shifted underneath them. Microsoft standardized its new graphics software around triangles, not quadrilaterals. In an instant, NVIDIA's chip was incompatible with the direction the entire PC industry was about to move. The result was devastating. The numbers Jensen uses to capture it are brutal in their simplicity. NVIDIA shipped out roughly 250,000 chips, and very nearly that same number came right back as returns. The company had sunk something like 2.5 years of work, plus most of its money, into an architecture the market simply refused to accept. They had built the wrong thing and they now knew it. Part 5: 30 Days from the End. This is where the first true near-death moment arrives. NVIDIA still owed Sega a finished chip under their contract, but Jensen knew the underlying design was a dead end. Pushing it to completion would burn through the company's last reserves, building something that could never succeed. So he did something painful and unusually honest. He flew to Japan, sat down with Sega's leadership, and told them the truth. The product was flawed and they should not keep going down this path. Then he made a bold request. Rather than finish the doomed chip, he asked Sega to take the remaining money owed on the contract, around $5 million, and convert it into an investment in NVIDIA instead. He has described his mindset in that moment very simply. Above absolutely everything else, his first job as chief executive was to make sure the company did not go out of business. Remarkably, Sega agreed. That willingness to admit a mistake out loud, rather than ship a product he knew was broken, is a large part of why NVIDIA lived to fight another day. But survival was brutal. The company was forced to lay off a huge share of its workforce, by some accounts around 70% of its people. And at the lowest point, NVIDIA was only about 30 days away from running out of money completely, with barely $30,000 left in the bank. The company that would one day be worth trillions was, at that instant, roughly a month from disappearing. Part 6: One Shot. The Riva 128 Gamble. With only months of runway left, Jensen made another high-stakes bet, the kind that only a desperate company would dare attempt. Normally, designing a new chip was a slow, expensive grind. You designed it, manufactured a batch, discovered all the flaws, fixed them, and manufactured again, a cycle that could easily take 2 years and several rounds. NVIDIA had neither the time nor the money for more than one attempt. So the team spent roughly half of their remaining cash on a single second-hand chip emulator, bought from a company that had gone bankrupt. The emulator let them test their next design entirely in software before paying to physically fabricate it. The trade-off was that it ran agonizingly slowly, reportedly rendering as little as one frame every 30 seconds, but it allowed them to validate the design first. Jensen's instruction to the team was blunt. The new chip, internally called NV3 and sold as the Riva 128, had to work on the very first try, because there would be no money for a second one. Against the odds, it did. The Riva 128 shipped in 1997 and sold around 1 million units within just a few months. NVIDIA had compressed a 2-year process into roughly 9 months and threaded the narrowest possible needle. That single product pulled the company back from the brink and bought it a future. Part 7. The Innovator's Dilemma and the Power of Good Enough. Jensen credits a single book with shaping how he thought through these life-or-death moments. Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. The idea he kept returning to is the concept of being good enough. A new technology, he learned, does not have to be perfect, and it does not have to beat the established players on every single measure. It only has to cross a threshold where it becomes genuinely useful. Once it crosses that line, it can begin displacing older, more expensive, more complicated options from below. The flip side of that lesson became a kind of warning he carried with him. When a company keeps polishing its products beyond what customers actually need, overserving the market with features nobody is asking for, it is quietly making itself vulnerable to something simpler and cheaper coming along. Jensen tried to keep NVIDIA on the disrupting side of that line again and again. Each major product the company shipped, from the Riva 128 onward, often looked underpowered or unconventional at first, but crossed the good enough threshold and went on to unseat incumbents who thought they were safe. Part 8, the decade-long bet nobody understood, CUDA. The boldest expression of that philosophy came in 2006, with a technology called CUDA. Up to that point, graphics chips, or GPUs, did essentially one thing. They made video games look good. CUDA was Jensen's audacious bet that those same chips could be transformed into general-purpose engines for serious computing, capable of crunching complex scientific and mathematical problems far beyond anything related to gaming. In essence, he wanted to turn gaming hardware into affordable supercomputers. The obstacle was a classic chicken and egg trap. Software developers won't write programs for a platform that has no users, and users won't adopt a platform that has no useful software. Jensen's answer was patient, expensive, and almost invisible to the outside world. NVIDIA built CUDA into every single GeForce gaming GPU it sold year after year, accepting thinner profit margins for a very long time in order to quietly seed millions of ordinary computers with this hidden capability. The logic was that if the technology was already sitting inside millions of machines, the software and the users would eventually follow. At the same time, NVIDIA sent teams around the world to universities, handing researchers the CUDA tools for free. These academics often had little money, but they had something more valuable. They published papers, trained students, and slowly built a global community of people who knew how to use NVIDIA's chips for real computation, not just for games. For years, this looked like madness from the outside. NVIDIA was pouring enormous resources into a platform with no clear commercial payoff, and many investors and observers simply could not understand why. Part 9, when the world finally caught up. The payoff, when it finally arrived, reshaped the entire world. Researchers exploring artificial intelligence made a pivotal discovery. NVIDIA's gaming chips were extraordinarily good at the massive, parallel number crunching that modern AI demands. And because NVIDIA had spent the better part of a decade making that capability available in every GPU, and teaching a whole generation of researchers how to use it, the company was perfectly positioned the moment the AI boom ignited. The very same machines that researchers had been quietly using turned out to be the engines the AI revolution needed. The company that had once been 30 days from collapse, the one nobody understood, suddenly found itself at the absolute center of the most important technological shift of the era. Its long, lonely, decade-long bet had become the foundation on which modern artificial intelligence was built, and NVIDIA rose to become the most valuable company in the world. Part 10, Jensen on AI, Fear, and the Future of Work. Having lived through all of this, Jensen holds clear and somewhat contrarian views about artificial intelligence today. He believes the fear surrounding AI has gotten out of control, particularly in the United States, and he worries that this widespread anxiety could actually undermine the country's ability to compete. His reasoning is that fear breeds hesitation, and in a fast-moving technological race, hesitation is its own serious disadvantage. He thinks people are, in his words, doing themselves a disservice by being so afraid. On the question everyone asks, whether AI will wipe out jobs, Jensen offers a useful distinction: the difference between a job's tasks and a job's true purpose. He points to radiology as a concrete example. Artificial intelligence can now read certain medical scans faster and more accurately than human doctors. By the simple logic of automation, that should mean fewer radiologists are needed. Yet the opposite has happened, and demand for radiologists has actually gone up. The reason is that when scanning becomes cheaper and faster, far more scans get ordered, the entire field expands, and more human expertise is needed, not less. His broader argument follows from this: before assuming AI will eliminate a role, you have to ask whether cheaper automation will expand the overall market, because historically that tends to create more opportunity rather than destroy it. He believes the next generation will have more opportunity because of AI, not less, provided people don't talk themselves into paralysis through fear. Part 11: Leadership, Honesty, and the True Cost of NVIDIA. Jensen is equally direct about how he runs NVIDIA. He is widely known as a demanding leader, and he doesn't apologize for it. He defends a company culture built on intellectual honesty, where people are expected to confront uncomfortable truths quickly and openly. It's the same instinct that once sent him to Japan to admit a product was a failure rather than quietly ship something broken. For Jensen, facing hard reality fast isn't cruelty. It's the only way a company survives moments like the ones NVIDIA lived through. That same brutal honesty produces one of the most striking moments in the entire conversation. When Guy Raz asks whether he would build NVIDIA all over again, knowing the full price he would have to pay, Jensen doesn't hesitate. His answer is no. He argues that most founders who claim they would do it all again are not being truthful with themselves, because they confuse the happy outcome with the actual lived process of getting there. The real experience, he says, was filled with years of humiliation, painful layoffs, and financial embarrassment. Memories so difficult that he actively works to forget them, just so he can keep moving forward. The success is undeniably real, but so is the cost, and Jensen flatly refuses to pretend that cost was anything less than enormous. Part 12: Family and What It All Cost. Beneath the business story runs a quieter, more personal thread. Both of Jensen's children, now in their mid-30s, eventually came to work at NVIDIA, but only after building their own independent careers first. He reflects, with a mix of pride and visible regret, on the fact that they have attended nearly all of his major company events over the years, even though he missed most of theirs while he was consumed with building the company that very nearly didn't survive. It's a small admission, but it speaks to the real human price hidden behind the headlines about market value. In the end, the lesson Jensen Huang leaves behind isn't a tidy formula for success. It's something closer to a meditation on endurance. NVIDIA survived because its founder was willing to admit mistakes quickly, cut his losses without flinching, make terrifying bets when no safe option remained, and keep believing in a vision long after nearly everyone else had given up on it. The world now sees a multi-trillion-dollar company sitting at the heart of the defining technology of our age. Jensen still remembers the diner booth, the return chips piling up, the 70% of his team he had to let go, and the 30 days of cash that once stood between his idea and complete oblivion. NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, from near